All right, guys. Hey, it's Miss Moore White back with the second part of our chapter 13 video. Chapter 13 is all about the world being entangled between 1600 and 1750. So the last video talked about some of the gender imbalances that are going to happen because of slavery, both in Africa as well as in the Caribbean and in America, or in the Americas. And now we're going to kind of shift a little bit and leave the New World and leave Africa and actually turn towards Asia. So let's just go on and, get started. Why not? All right. So as I said previously, the previous ones were about some of the intros to the chapter as well as the slave trade. So let's just get right to it. So Asia in the 17th and 18th centuries. So Europeans were not as dominant in Asian trade networks. Ding, ding, ding. Reason number one is because they did not have access to silver. And Chinese marketplaces are pretty much only going to take silver. And so until the Europeans are able to get their hands on a bunch of silver, they're going to be pretty excluded from Asian trade networks. So with that, the Mughal dynasty or the Mughal Empire is going to continue to grow. The Mughal Empire is where modern day India is located. So we're going to see the Mughal Empire is the first empire or dynasty that is truly going to unify India. So previously we called India a mosaic. That mosaic are those little pieces of glass that make a really beautiful picture, but they're not necessarily unified. And so that means that India was like a mosaic. They had a lot of really awesome cultural parts, a lot of history, a lot of things that were happening, but they weren't connected. And so we're going to see that the Mughal dynasty is going to find ways to finally unify the Indian peninsula. The Qing dynasty is going to significantly expand China's borders. They're going to go north. They're going to go a little bit to the east, and they're going to kind of spread around. And so we'll see how those changes are going to impact the Qing dynasty. All right, China during this time period, this is like the last time period that I can say this truthfully, China remained the richest state in the world between 1600 and 1750. After we leave 1750, the balance is changing. All right, so the balance of power shifts to Europeans, as I just said. So by the late 18th century, Europe had established economic and military dominance in parts of India and much of Southeast Asia. And guess what's coming further into the 19th century? You guessed it, China's next. All right, let's talk about the Dutch specifically in Southeast Asia. So the Dutch, or Netherlands, chartered this company called, and this, once again, these companies, these combo companies are going to be a combination between the government and the merchant class. So we have the Dutch East India Company, also known as the VOC, if you're speaking in Dutch, excuse me. So in 1602, this is going to change Portuguese and Spanish influence. So we have another third person or third nation entering into Southeast Asia. So because of Amsterdam's financial banking strength, the VOC was able to raise 10 times the capital of the English East India Company. So once again, Amsterdam has access to a lot of funds, which allowed them to rapidly come into this marketplace and change up things, whereas Spanish and Portuguese and the English were not as financially as viable in their homelands, which made them a little bit slower to chartering their companies or being able to really change the flow of things. So the goal was to achieve trade monopolies. So literally the Dutch are coming in saying, I want to control everything that happens here. I don't want anybody else to have any kind of access. They want to fix prices. So, if we're all saying the price is $5 and somebody over there selling it for 10, well, guess what? Everyone who's selling it for $5 is going to make their profit. Or better yet, if you're selling it for 10, you're going to ensure that nobody else is selling it for less than $10. And also they're going to try to replace the local populations with Dutch trade. So literally they're trying to supplant the local Asian population with Europeans and have those Europeans control the economic place, eventually the political sphere and things like that. So they're going to take over Jakarta in 1619, the Bandanese Islands in 1621, and the local population is going to be killed or sold into slavery. Vicious. Okay. And then keep on going. We're going to see the Portuguese are going to get Malacca, which is also going to be in Southeast Asia in 1670. And here we go. Why are they doing all this stuff? Spices. So one thing we know about Europe, Europe does not have access to any kind of spices. Man. They are, yeah, their food's bland. I'm gonna just leave it at that. So with that, the VOC is going to try to achieve a monopoly on pepper. Pepper is really important during this time period because you don't have access to refrigeration. So if you can't refrigerate your meat, it pretty much is all spoiled. So the only way you can eat spoiled meat is if you throw a little pepper on there, and it tends to distort the taste. So pepper is incredibly important if people want to have carnivorous diets during this time period. So they're going to have to share their marketplace with Chinese and English competitors. So the English are going to try their hardest to control that marketplace. And so are the Chinese going to try to control their stronghold. But we're going to see the Dutch, as we saw in our DBQ that happened. They are going to really be the ones who end up controlling the pepper trade. All right, so transformation of the Islamic heartland. So we're going to say that the Islamic heartland did not experience direct effects of European intrusion, mostly because, China had things they wanted to get. Africa had slaves. The Americas had, all this land and territory. And no offense to the Islamic heartland, but those three little regions, the Ottoman, Safavid, and Mughal empires or dynasties were not as appealing, at least during this time period. So, but they are going to have a lot of internal conflicts happening. So once again, these three regions, as I'll talk about later, the gunpowder empires are going to be relatively similar in their military might, in their weaponry, but where they're different is just kind of in how they express their culture, how they express their religion and things like that. So Safavid Empire is going to be like one of the earliest of the three that's going to fall away. So the Ottomans going to last all the way into the 1900s. The Mughal dynasty is going to end in the late 1700s, early 1800s, but the Safavids are going to collapse in the middle of the 1700s. Or the beginning of 1700, excuse me. Safavids are going to face declining tax revenue and weak rulers collapsing in 1722. So declining tax revenue. We have all these places that have conquered all these regions, and now they have to collect taxes on these things, on these places. So how they collect taxes is going to be quite interesting. Some are going to require or rely on a jizya, or that tax that is given to people who are non-Muslim in Muslim-controlled areas. Or the Safavids are going to be a little bit different. They're going to force everyone to turn into Shia Islam or Shia Muslims. And if you don't, you're going to die. Anyway, so now with that, the Ottomans and Mughal empires are going to remain more resilient. The Ottomans are going to be incredibly resilient because they have so much land. They're going to have land from Africa all the way through Europe into Asia, all over the place. And that's what's going to really help them survive for so long. They're going to be able to basically, when they lose land in certain places, they can always retreat to the land they still have because they have so much land. The Mughal dynasty as well, because they're that unifying force happening in India, they're going to be able to sustain a little bit longer than the Safavid Empire is going to. All right, let's talk about the Ottomans specifically. So after Suleiman the Great, the Ottomans are going to face a period of territorial loss and decline. So Suleiman the Great is going to basically be the ruler that gets them the most land that they have during their reign. Once again, that land is going to go from North Africa into Eastern Europe, into the Middle East, which is parts of Asia. So they're going to have a huge swath of land. They're going to control parts of land that was once formerly the Byzantine Empire, which before then was a part of the Roman Empire. So they're going to be a continuation of some of these long-standing dynasties that we have seen in our history studies. The inflow of New World silver into the Ottoman commercial networks is going to destabilize the empire. Part of the reason why the Ottomans are going to avoid trading with the outside world. That's going to set them behind everyone else because everyone else during this time period is emphasizing trading around the world. Merchants increasingly defied commercial regulations and traded commodities such as wheat, copper, and wool to Europeans for silver. So once again, we have all these luxury goods that Europeans want, and the only way they can acquire those is by trading silver for those things. So if we have the Ottomans, the government who is anti-trading with outsiders, but the merchants are saying, I need that money in my hands. We have an issue with our political and our economic systems that is not going to end well. So illegal trade is not going to generate tax revenue. But once again, the Ottomans have this gigantic empire they must control. So what's going to happen? Okay. So what's going to happen? The government's going to resort to deficit spending. That means you are spending money that you don't have with the hope that one day you will actually have that money. Okay. So deficits, shortages, and the inflow of silver sparked a runaway inflation for about 100 years, from 1550 to 1650. And that's going to prompt peasant uprisings in Anatolia. Anatolia is, man, I just drew a blank on modern day place that is, but that is in Turkey somewhere, okay? Modern day Turkey, okay? So with that though, whenever your government's not able to take care of the people, and by the people, I usually mean the peasants, the lower class, the people who are working, those laborers, they're every single time they're going to uprise against the government. Because if the government's not taking care of your most basic needs and you're stuck in this caste system and there's a lot more peasants than there are of anyone else, well, guess what? You're going to go down and the peasants are going to be sleeping in your palace. All right, moving on. So we have breakaway regimes are going to emerge in the provinces. So that basically means we have this huge Ottoman Empire, but inside of it, it's going to be fragmented. And we're going to see these smaller governments rising up saying, I'm the captain. I'm the one who controls stuff here. Anyway, that leads to further issues, destabilization, further confusion, and it also will further their issues with tax revenue, because if this new government is out here taking and collecting money, well, guess what? The real government is further having to go into deficit spending and not being able to acquire much. All right, the Ottoman Empire in Egypt. So once again, the Ottomans go from North Africa, East Europe, all the way into the Middle East. So the biggest threat to the breakaway pressures in the Ottoman Empire was from Egypt in the 17th century, so the 1600s. So Egypt gained in 1570. So that's when they were able to acquire it. So the Ottomans started around the 1300s. They're going to last all the way until 1914, 1918, 1922. So we, in the middle of this time period, kind of when we have Suleiman who's still expanding. So they're going to get Egypt during that time period. And then we have the Mamluks. So Arabic for owned or possessed, had ruled Egypt as an independent regime until the Ottoman conquest. Okay, so once again, these Mamluk people had been in control, but the Ottomans are going to allow the Mamluks to remain. That's going to be the Ottomans' ruling strategy. So they're going to believe, yo, I can't force people to live how I want them to live. And in fact, if I want my empire to sustain itself, I can't be too forceful. I have to be pretty friendly to people sometimes. So the Ottomans are going to be known as a tolerant or a permissive kind of society, where they're not going to make you take on holistically take on Ottoman culture. They're going to actually allow you to kind of retain a little bit of your own. Okay, so Mamluks are going to have enhanced power by the 17th century by aligning themselves with Egyptian merchants and the ulama, or the religious class for Islam. They're also going to keep taxes for themselves instead of paying the Ottoman administrators. So the one negative to not eradicating everyone is that they can stay around and later on cause issues for you, like the Mamluks are going to do in the Ottoman Empire. So the Ottomans let them stay alive, and the Mamluks repaid them by taking their money and aligning themselves up with people, with Egyptian merchants and with the religious class who was not associated with the Ottoman Empire. All right, so the Ottomans during the 17th and 18th century, transformations of the Islamic heartland. So the Ottoman Empire, they're going to be incredibly resilient. You got to be pretty resilient if you're able to last from the 1300s into the 1900s, the early 1900s. That is an incredible reign. It's one of the longest, actually, it's the longest reign of any dynasty ever. Okay, so we're going to see that they're going to create some corporulu reforms, so financial reforms, anti-corruption measures, and things like that. So their military is going to be able to reacquire some areas they've lost during this time period. Revenue is going to increase because they got control over those areas again, able to get that tax revenue flowing in, and inflation is also going to decrease for similar reasons. They have more control over their economy. So they're going to try to take Vienna in 1683, but they're going to be pretty unsuccessful. So some of their military conquests in Europe were not as always successful as they were in other places. So we're going to see a treaty is going to end the Austro-Ottoman War, resulting in substantial territorial losses, including Hungary. This is going to be important for later on Ottoman history. So as the Ottoman Empire starts to fall in the early 20th century, right around the end of World War I, we're going to see that a lot of places that the Ottoman controlled, it's going to be split into a lot of different nations, including Hungary, Austria, Czechoslovakia, Slovenia, and so many other modern countries that we know. So all of this is important. So the influx of silver is going to undermine Ottoman 16th century versions of self-contained imperial economy. So the Ottomans wanted everything that happened in their empire to come from their empire, to be supported by their empire. But with all this new silver floating around the world, that's not always going to be possible. So unfortunately, we're going to open up the Ottoman Empire to trade with the rest of the world, which is going to produce breakaway regimes, inflation, and social discontentment from all those peasants who are not being taken care of by the government. Next slide. The Mughal Empire continued. Oh, whoa. There we go. Mughal, the Mughal Empire or the Mughal Dynasty. I've heard it. I usually call it dynasty. They got the empire here. Anyway, the Mughal Empire is going to reach its heights in the 1600s. Okay, that's when it's going to be the largest. Okay, we're going to have increased economic prosperity, Islamic areas. Okay, but then also this Islamic area is in India. Okay, so remembering India is mostly Hindu though, so this is an Islamically controlled empire, but that they're in a mostly Hindu area. So they're eventually going to face internal conflicts with governing dispersed and resistant provinces. So similar to other places like the Ottoman Empire, they're going to conquer a lot of places. They're going to control a lot of regions, a lot of different culture that's different possibly from their own. So India, once again, mostly Islamic, mostly Hindu, but the Mughal dynasty is 100% Islamic. People are going to push back against that. So India had a single political authority for the first time under Mughal regime. So once again, previously, India is a mosaic. I don't want to say it again, but they're a mosaic. And now we finally have India being unified with the Mughal Empire. So their main source of wealth is going to be land rent. So all the people that they're conquering and controlling, they're going to make them pay some rent, okay? And also we're going to see a benefit from European rise in demand for Indian goods. So just like China, those luxury goods coming out of India are going to be quite interesting to the Europeans, and it's going to force them to, try to trade with them more and basically increase their economic prosperity. All right, increased economic expansion, prosperity, and agricultural development empowered regional and local rulers to resist Mughal authority. Okay, so once again, the people who live there, that mosaic of India, they don't want to be taken over, just like in a lot of other places. Okay, so with that being said, a lot of the local ruler elites are going to be more autonomous. So they're going to listen to the government even less than they did before they had the Mughal Empire there. So that could be an issue if you have your local warriors who should be your military class, but who have not aligned themselves with you. So Indian peasants are going to rebel. It sounds similar to what's happening in the Ottoman Empire, which also sounds similar to what's going to happen in the Safavid Empire. So all of these things are happening together. So once again, these gunpowder empires, the Ottomans, Safavids, and the Mughals all have a lot of similarities that are going to help them thrive and grow, but then also help all three of them condense and eventually recede. Mughal authority diminished to power over a loose unity of provincial states of semi-autonomous regions. So they controlled too much, too quickly, too fast. But when they did it, they did a pretty good job. But as they start to lose it, they are losing it, similar to what happened with the Ottomans, when we have smaller fragments of government popping up and taking your power, taking your taxes, taking all of those things. But even with that happening, even with all the discontent happening, the Mughal dynasty in India is still going to flourish because a lot of the merchants are going to align themselves with European traders, and those European traders want these Asian luxury goods. So global commercial world enriched local rulers and merchants while undermining Mughal imperial rule. So once again, the global merchants are going to make themselves rich and other merchants rich, but they're going to undermine the government of the Mughal dynasty because the Mughals do not want to trade outside like other Islamic places. All right, so now we're going to leave the Islamic heartland, and we're going to head a little bit further east. Okay, so to the right, we're going to go a little bit further east, and we're going to check out China now. So how are we going to transition from Ming to Qing? So from that brilliant dynasty into, I forget what the other one means, but either way, how are we going to go from Ming to Qing? So persistence of local autonomy and accelerated economic and social changes culminated in collapse of the Ming dynasty in 1644. So the Ming dynasty is going to collapse, similar to what happens in other places. So they have local autonomy that is not listening to the governments, the overall government, which means that they're not getting tax revenue. They're having issues with them and all those things, similar to what's happening in, just east of them, just west of them, excuse me, in the Middle East. All right, so administrative and economic problems. Ziyujun, the Wanli emperor from 1573 to 1620, and other emperors were largely ceremonial with little actual control over their vast empire. So they're a ceremonial figure, kind of similar to Queen Elizabeth, in which she does not actually have power, but she does have the title. So similar things are happening. The bureaucracy is so gigantic that it is not really looking to the emperor to be run, they're kind of running themselves. So we're going to see expanding opportunities for trade lead many individuals to circumvent official rules. My God, that seems to be happening around the world, okay? So similar to what's happening in the Middle East, people are seeing money as a motivating factor. So that money is everything, and their government seems to be a hindrance to their acquisition of money. So they're going to go around the government and ensure that they still have access to all of their goods or trading or money, whatever it is. So pirates, supposedly from Japan, but often we're really just Chinese people dressed as Japanese, are going to wreak havoc on the Chinese coast. So, if you already have issues with a place, why don't you just blame all the crime that you're doing on that place and then cause more issues for that place while you get all the money? And that's the pirates that were really Chinese, but said they were Japanese. Anyway. So in good times, these pirates acted like merchants' elites, mingling with imperial officials and moving among the mosaic of Indian cultures. So these pirates would just take the things they stole and sell them to other places around the world, essentially, or other East Asian cultures, excuse me. Pretty smart if you ask me. All right. So China in the 17th and 18th centuries continued. So the influx of silver from the New World caused severe economic impacts. So by the early 17th century, silver imports exceeded domestic bullion or uncoined gold and silver 20 times to 1. So they're bringing in 20 times as much silver or gold as they're able to actually produce for themselves. So Chinese economy was monetized as silver became the primary currency. So what that means, if you ain't got no silver, we ain't doing business with you. So in times of silver abundance, peasants faced inflation. In times of shortness, peasants scrambled to pay taxes. So no matter what, the working class or the peasant class is always going to be taking a hit, either inflation because things cost too much or because you don't have enough to actually pay. And some of these issues with the peasant class are things that we see today in our working class populations in the United States and also in other places around the world. All right. And so, but the one thing that we will say is that, at least in the US, we don't have a lot of peasant uprisings across time and throughout history. When peasants were not taken care of, they are going to riot and they are going to rebel. And that is because peasants always in every country, even to this day, the working class are going to outnumber those that are in power, those that are incredibly wealthy by huge numbers. So the peasants got smart, strength in numbers. Let's rally and unify and hopefully make some changes for ourselves. All right, now the fall of the Ming dynasty. So we're going to go from Ming to Qing. So the collapse of Ming authority. The Ming's difficulties began to affect subjects' daily life. They could not cope with natural disasters and food shortages in the early 16th century. So once again, if you're an emperor who's not able to adequately address or identify when natural disasters are going to happen, they don't trust you, and you have lost the mandate of heaven, and you must go too. Okay. So outlaw armies grew large under charismatic leaders. So charismatic leaders, those are going to be your Hitlers, your Joseph Stalins, your Benito Mussolinis, your Barack Obamas. Did I say that out loud? Oh, well, anyway, so those are going to be your JFKs, your whoever. Those are going to be charismatic. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, charismatic leaders. So we're going to see these large armies are going to grow from these charismatic leaders. So one of them, a rebellion is going to be led by the dashing prince, going to be captured in Beijing in 1614, and that's going to cause the emperor to commit suicide because he lost the mandate of heaven. All right. And then after that, the dashing prince is going to take the throne. And Ming army commanders built an alliance with the Manchus. The Manchus are going to be north of China. So Manchuria is what it's called today, but they were called the Manchus before then. So from Ming to Qing in China, the Qing dynasty asserts control right after the Ming falls away. The Manchus are going to be descendants of the Jurchens. So once again, these barbarians that China used to try to keep out. So we have this Great Wall of China, you know that thing? That Great Wall of China was built to keep the Manchus out. But now the Chinese with the Qing are actually including the Manchus into their culture because the Manchus are the ones who are running the Qing dynasty. So we have this outsider group that is going to all right, so we have this outsider group that is going to kind of reestablish a pureness or a purity in China, and that's going to last all the way pretty long from 1644 to 1911 towards the beginning of World War I, but also it's going to lead to a lot of negative things in Chinese history. So the small population of Manchus, of 1 million Manchus, governed the Chinese population of 250 million, the largest population in the world during that time, and they still have a large population today. So 1 million people governing 250 million. Is it going to last? Never. But it's going to work for a little bit. All right, so the Qing expanded its realm in terms of territories, economy, and population. Well, territory, Manchus, north part of China is now bigger. The economy is going to grow because they're, unlike other places, since they are actual barbarians coming into China, they're going to let other barbarians come into China too and trade with them. It works, okay? And population is also going to grow because they're going to conquer, they're going to, increase agricultural output, which leads to always a population boom as well. So early Manchu emperors are going to be successful because they were able and diligent administrators with flexibility and respect for local traditions. So these are barbarians coming into a place that does not like barbarians or these outsiders. So how are they going to survive? Well, they're going to be flexible and they're going to respect local traditions. So they're going to be many Confucianists and kind of go with that filial piety and things like that. So they're also going to promote patriarchal views, which is kind of similar to, a lot of places. So patriarchy is going to be super important in Chinese society, unfortunately. But at least with the Ming Dynasty, women had a chance. If you were educated or your family had money, or if your family was in royalty, you had a chance to actually influence culture, write books and things like that. But with the Qing Dynasty, that's going to fade away. All right, so the Qing officials translated important documents into Manchu. So we have a lot of documents that were originally being transferred or being copied into Chinese, and now they're going to make them more accessible to the Manchurians who are coming down into China. And here we go. So even though we're going to leave the local traditions, what they are going to do is that if you are Han, so most people in China to this day say they are part of the Han dynasty or Han bloodline. I don't know how believable that is, whatever, but they claim Han. So if you were a Han person, you had to wear your hair in manners that the Manchus did. So basically you had to shave the areas around your forehead and only wear a braided part in the middle. You guys have probably seen pictures of that. It's pictures of it in the textbook. And you guys can kind of see what that style looks like. So if you were a Han man or living in that in the Qing dynasty, you have to have that haircut. And then also they're going to ban intermarriage between Hans and Manchu, although it's going to be pretty difficult to enforce because people, if you have 1 million Manchus and you have 250 million Hans, it's only a matter of time before somebody starts to intermix. And they're not going to necessarily be able to tell which person is which over time. All right, so from Ming to Qing, we can see the growth. So here is the area under the Ming Dynasty. Okay. And then here is the Manchu homeland that's going to get added to China. And then the Manchus are going to expand even more and go into Asia even more. So they're going to head a little bit further. What direction is this? So if this is going east, they're going to go a little bit to the west. Okay. So they're going to go out west and north of where they were previously. They're also going to drop down, and these are tributary states. So basically, these are places that they control and are forced to pay them taxes and things like that. So all this is happening in about 115-year time period. All right, so the Qing dynasty asserts control. Manchu's imposition and taxes fell mostly on the peasants. So we got 250 million people here, and the largest population of them is going to be peasants. And those peasants are going to be the ones who also pay most of the taxes. If we look at modern day times, that is also the similar things to happen. Think about the billionaires. Billionaires barely pay taxes. Meanwhile, people who are in lower class make a lot less money, pay a lot more in taxes. Peasants began to live in broader areas, planting New World crops like corn and sweet potatoes that grew better in difficult soil. So because of the trading that's happening, the exposure that's happening, that Columbian exchange that's happening, that triangle trade that's happening, we're going to see that also means that we're going to have access to more plants and vegetables and things like that. And that also means that the rice that China was known for growing is also going to be spread around the world. So rice is going to become a staple diet of the wealthy, and peasants are going to eat corn and sweet potatoes because it's still pretty hard to grow rice in China during this time period. Commerce is going to flourish because they're trading and money and silver and all that stuff. All right, and so moving on. So we're going to see the Canton system, okay? So that's going to happen. The empire is going to want this. They're going to want they're going to require European traders to have Chinese gilded merchants act as guarantors for their behavior and payment of fees. So we still see these Europeans as barbarians and as outsiders. And so in order to ensure that Chinese people will be safe when interacting with the Europeans, they're forcing each one of the European traders to have someone Chinese there who guarantees that they have good respect, good behavior, and also can pay all their things on time. The Qing are going to force tributary relations between Vietnam, Korea, Burma, and Nepal. So once again, they're going to force those places to pay the Qing payments or suffer. The Qing is going to expand their territory, as I saw on that map previously. So we go back Asia, into Tibet, into Outer Mongolia, Turkestan, all those places we're going to see an expansion. Okay. All right. And finally, the Ming relied on Chinese agriculture for its economic health and not overseas trade, which some historians see as their failure to adapt to a changing world. So just like a lot of the Islamic worlds, they're saying, yeah, we don't really need support. But specifically in China, China has this belief that they are the center of the world. They are the most important person in the world, and the world is going to revolve around them. That was a horrible miscalculation because Europe, since China had been excluding them from trade markets for so long, had been working real hard and diligently to get access. And then eventually they're going to overtake the Chinese. All right, so the new level of Chinese prosperity is going to peak in 1644. But it's looking real sad for the future. All right, Tokugawa, Japan. All right, so Japan dealt with external pressures better than its Asian counterparts. So China and India were not the best when it came to outsiders, but Japan, they were smart. So they're going to see a single ruling family is going to emerge. The Tokugawa shogunate, which is going to regulate foreign intrusion. So for the first time, and so we're going to see what happens, what we call the unification of Japan. So similar to what happened in India, Japan is not known for was known for being fragmented or broken up. And so with that, we're going to see a unification is going to happen. And basically it's going to happen with the ruling it's going to happen because we have civil strife, no regional ruling families or daimyos with private armies of military could establish preeminence over the other. So basically they're just trying to figure it out. And this is what's going to allow the Tokugawa in 1601 to rise up and seize power, okay, as the shogun or the military ruler. So with that, we're going to see a hereditary shogunate is going to be put in place all the way from 1603 to 1867. And that takes us pretty modern times into Japan. All right, and we're going to see a movement of the capital from Kyoto to Edo, which is modern day Tokyo. So we see shifting happening that's going to lead us to modern day things. And with that, we're going to see villages are going to be forced to pay taxes to daimyos who transfer the resources to the shogunate or shogun. So we see finally an actual system is put in place, a pattern is put in place, things that make sense. Their tax system makes sense, and it's not just a bunch of infighting happening between different places. All right, so here is our map of Tokugawa, Japan between 1603 and 1867. So you guys can see the parts that Tokugawa is going to control. And then also the other hereditary daimyos that had control, but then also passed on their financial money to the shogunate. And then we have the brown sections are going to be people who are outer daimyos who were not as aligned with the Japanese culture, okay? Or the Tokugawa culture, excuse me. All right, foreign affairs and foreigners. Most pressing concerns were Chinese missionaries and European traders. So Japan was pretty spot on. So how China was like, we don't want you guys to come in. Japan was like, let's see what's going on here. So the shogunates supposed Christianity and drove missionaries out once they realized that Christians were intolerant of other faiths. So remember, in Asian society, a lot of them might be Buddhist, Hindu, Confucius, or any number of other, what is the other one? It is, I'm drawing a blank on it. It's okay, my brain. Anyway, so any number of things that they could be, but once the shogunate found out that Christians were intolerant, so Muslims are tolerant, Jewish people are known to be pretty tolerant, but the Christians are intolerant of anyone else. So because of their intolerance, they're going to push the Christian missionaries out. And that, man, the pushing of Christian missionaries out is going to be a whole section in itself later on in Asian history. All right, so at first, the Tokugawa restricted European traders to ports in Tokyo and Hansu. Then they expelled all European competitors except for the non-religious Dutch merchants who were allowed to remain near Nagasaki with just one ship per year. So Japan got smart. They pushed the Europeans out and they're going to try to control everything. Okay, so with that though, they're not going to completely isolate Japan from other places. There's still going to be a lot of trading happening between China and Korea, and that's going to be important later on in history. And also the shoguns are going to limit encounters to Dutch and Chinese technology, shipbuilding, medicine, to ensure Japan's security. And that's where they're going to be smart. Other places are going to turn away from European supplies, but Japan is going to say, let me see what I can use to protect myself, and everything else I'm going to throw away. So religion, we don't need that. Okay, cool. But their technology, the shipbuilding, and the merchants and their medicine, all of those things are going to be really, really important to securing Japan. And Japan is going to turn towards those European ideals. And that's going to be a big difference between Japan and a lot of other places. Japan is going to welcome in European ideas that can help them and then turn away from European ideas that cannot. Meanwhile, in China, they're just going to turn away all European ideas. And that's going to be their downfall.
All right, guys, so I realized that I talked way too long on this video, so I had to cut it short. So the third part is going to be probably about a 20-minute video, but this is the end for the second part. All right, guys, enjoy. I'll see you guys in class. Bye.